What's up? You're listening to The Long Game, and I'm your host, David Lee Kim, co-founder of Omniscient Digital. In this episode, we chat with Daryna Kulya. Daryna is the co-founder and COO at OpenPhone, a phone platform for startups and small businesses that's backed by Tiger Global, Growth Ventures, and Y Combinator. Previously, she led product management for Vidyard's premium offering. In this conversation, we talk about her journey building OpenPhone from the ground up. She talks about the different types of functions she's had to take on to grow the business, including marketing, sales, and customer support. OpenPhone's business model is interesting because they're a product-led growth company, but they're a paid product, essentially from the beginning. And Daryna talks through how they made that decision and how it's played out. We also talk about the growing pains of management and leadership and having a counterbalance in life where you make time to get away from anything related to business or even the internet. Here's my conversation with Daryna Kulya. Daryna, welcome to The Long Game.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making the time. So I was doing some research on you before our conversation, and I found an old page of yours. I think it was hosted on about.me, which I don't know if people still use it, but it's still showing up in Google. And I saw that you lived in Bonn, Germany, Prosper, Texas, Toronto, Canada. You're currently in San Francisco, I believe, and you're from Kiev, Ukraine. So maybe let's start there. Like, what brought you to each of these places?
Thank you. Well, a great question. And that page, you just reminded me that I have that page on. So I'll see what I can do about that page. My journey started. So I'm from Ukraine. I'm from Kiev, Ukraine. When I was 16 years old, I got this scholarship to come to the US. So my first destination was Prosper, Texas, and I was a high school student on an exchange program. Honestly, that one thing in my life that I feel like if I did not do that program, I definitely would not be here, because I had that first experience of getting really out of my comfort zone and leaving my home and coming to the US. And from there, I think my love for adventure kind of it kicked off this feeling that I had, which is like, wow, there's such a big world we live in. I want to explore places. So I told myself that I want to be kind of outside of my comfort zone and exploring and traveling. So then I went to university in Canada. And from there, I got internships. I got an internship in Germany, which I loved so much. Which, fun fact, there's a bit of a tie-in because my first internship was at T-Mobile, which is telecommunications, which kind of, there's a little bit of a connection between there and what I'm doing. But that was in Germany. And from there, San Francisco came here already when we were building OpenPhone for Y Combinator. So things just kind of happened. I think that my kind of desire was always to put myself out of my comfort zone and just to have my curiosity lead me and not really having a very long-term plan. So I let my curiosity take me places.
That is the opposite of how I function. I have this 5-year plan. It doesn't all go according to plan, but I like having at least something in mind, even if things will change. But it's interesting to hear how not having a plan for you has worked out, where it's go to university in a new country and figure it out from there and just follow. It sounds like following your curiosity and where things take you.
Absolutely. Well, I do have to say, I think I have definitely more of a plan now. I feel like I kind of have to. I think in my early 20s, I did not have a plan.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the desire and the need for planning has definitely kind of appeared in my life. But I think that for what I'm very thankful for is just being able to do it. I feel this is why when I talk to, friends who are in college or, in early 20s, and they're like, what do I do with my life? And I think that's the beauty. You still have, you have this canvas, you can do anything, and you can have your curiosity lead you places.
Yeah, I love that a lot. And I think that ties in with this next question. So just that idea of following your curiosity, again, part of my research, I was looking at your LinkedIn, and it's interesting because you've kind of jumped around in terms of your profession or function a bit in terms of what you do at these companies. So you started at Deloitte as a consultant, made your way into product management, and you became a founder. And even as a co-founder, I've seen some websites that say you're a COO, but in interviews I've listened to, you talk a lot about marketing. So it sounds like you're very much this generalist. So tell us about that whole journey to where you are.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good call out. The when I graduated from university, I got into consulting, and I think the one kind of thing there was I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, and a lot of people told me that that's where you go when you don't quite know yet, and because you get to learn a lot of things, get exposure to a lot of different businesses, industries, etc. So when I got into consulting, I actually quickly learned that I was like, well, I think I love tech. I didn't need too much exposure to things. I was like, I really like tech. And interestingly, I also quickly figured out that I really like the idea of building things. So the allure of a job of a product manager, I was one of those people who was like, I want to be a product manager and nothing else. I really got that in my head. And the challenge was that I found that, I worked at Deloitte, and I kind of got exposure to consulting. A lot of tech startups, I was also super interested in startups. I realized they don't really have, the money to hire Deloitte, so I couldn't really work with them as a consultant. And I started doing sort of extracurricular activities, building things on the side, participating in hackathons, just basically having this like life outside of my work to break into tech. And I've managed to do it. Got a job at Vidyard, which is an amazing company based just outside of Toronto in Kitchener-Waterloo, and had a chance to be a product manager there. And I'm very, very thankful and grateful I did that. But yeah, I quickly realized that the Deloitte life wasn't for me, and I associated myself and what I wanted to do much more with like early stage companies.
Got it. What were you doing on the side? Like, what are some examples of what you were doing to break into tech? Because I think this idea of changing job roles or changing careers is quite nebulous for a lot of people. So maybe for younger folks listening, like what did you do tactically to move into another direction?
Absolutely. Well, I can give you very specific examples. So I think the biggest one was that back in, I think this was 2014, in my kind of journey to explore things, I heard about a site called Product Hunt. I saw it's a destination for people who love kind of like geeking out on new products. And it felt like that magical place where new things get discovered, get built. And it really intrigued me. So I just honestly initially started following, just seeing what's happening. And I think at some point, this is now I think my memory is kind of failing me a bit, but I kind of spontaneously decided to organize a community of people who like Product Hunt in Toronto. And what became this like idea, like, hey, let's get together and talk about new products, became really this really big meetup that I ended up organizing, which I don't really feel like it was my intention. It really was this concept that kind of grew into this really big event. The biggest event we've hosted had almost 500 people. We flew in like guests from San Francisco. We had sponsors. It almost became, the idea was never to make money. That was not the point. But it almost kind of became like a mini sort of business, because there's like expenses and there is like tickets and you have to bring in guests. But really for me, what it became is this opportunity to that was kind of my little project where I could create something. I felt like a builder, and I was building this community. I was thinking about kind of events, and we had a team, and we were organizing, bringing people together. It was really cool for me to discover new products and give them spotlight. That was really the most rewarding part. The fact that I could find people building things that were super, super early and have them present their work in front of an audience of early adopters. And I felt like it was so cool to give these products a chance to find their early customers. And the whole thing was just so exciting to me. So that's one example. So I guess going back to your question, I mean, I don't necessarily know if this will work for everyone, but for me, this was an outlet for me to get involved with the tech community, I obviously met so many startups through this. So I guess I could kind of like, so then when I started interviewing, I wasn't, a corporate person in a suit. I was also this person who is like, oh, okay, you're in the community.
You're one of us.
You're one of us. Yeah. Another thing I did, which is maybe like some other examples, I definitely started prototypes. I went to basically any hackathon I could find. And the idea was finding co-founders, finding, people I could collaborate with, finding maybe trying to find my passion. So this is maybe more practical. I thought it was super cool. I attended so many hackathons and I met folks in these hackathons who I now, we're still friends, and it's such a cool experience. So that's a good one, because then you have some projects and things to show and say, hey, I've been building this thing with a team.
Yeah. What I love is, it was an open-ended question intentionally. And what is really interesting to me is you weren't asking for permission or over-analyzing what was the right thing to do to get into tech. You were just like, this looks interesting. Let me go organize this community. Let me go to these hackathons, and not, maybe you weren't sure what you were getting yourself into, but you just went and took action, which is, I think, the main message there is don't overthink it. Just start doing some things.
Oh, for sure. Start somewhere. Yeah. And you will find things you may not like doing. I think that this is kind of, definitely start doing something. And I think you get that feedback loop going, hey, I'm doing this. This seems fun to me. Cool. Do more of that.
Yeah. So then you mentioned you were working at Vidyard. You started working on the Product Hunt community. Fast forward to now, you're working on OpenPhone, and there's a lot to dig in there. But maybe before we jump into the specifics, I have to ask, why a VoIP software? It's not the first thing that comes to mind of like, oh, what software should I build? To me, it seems like this like ancient industry that is like slow and boring, but you've somehow like made into this modern product. So tell me, like, what excites you about the industry?
For sure. Well, I think one thing that excites me about it is I may not think about the industry as much. So frankly, I don't think about VoIP and like voice over IP. I mean, obviously it's in the industry we operate in, it's the category we're in. And I definitely follow the category and see where things are going. But I think so much more about our customers. And what got me excited about building OpenPhone was more the impact that we can have on small businesses and startups, the folks who are building the product for. And I feel like if you're a customer of OpenPhone, you don't think about, I hope you don't think it's like, oh, this is like VoIP. This is like, a telecommunications product. Like, sure, it is. But you think about, if you're one of our customers, you think about, how to grow your business. You think about how to make your customers happy. You think about how to make sure your team, isn't overloaded with conversations they shouldn't be having. They are more effective and efficient with their time. You think about those things, and I think about those things as well, which I think is what helps us hopefully make a better product, because we put ourselves so much in the shoes of our customers versus in the shoes of like, oh, we're just building this like cool technology.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it changes the frame of, instead of asking what does a VoIP software do or what should it do, it's what do our customers need and how does our platform support them? And that might open up a lot of the thinking rather than narrowing it in.
Absolutely. And I think that what we found is that thinking and actually the fact that, going back to your question around, why this industry, I feel like maybe if I had experience in this industry, I probably would not have been so excited. I think this is where maybe not having experience in the industry is what has been, I think, our competitive advantage. Of course, we have to pair it with getting advice and working with folks who have experience. It can't just all be kind of ignorant to what's going on. But I think it's that curiosity and like the questions that I would ask allowed me to learn about, again, like focusing on the customer, not on the technology.
Yeah. And what's always interesting to me, especially in this day and age of like all these SaaS products and all the competitors in every vertical, is like differentiation. Like I actually had to go to G2 and look up what category OpenPhone fell into because I wasn't sure. I was like, this is a cool product, but I don't know how to categorize it. So maybe that goes into like, how do you think about differentiating yourself in the market? Because when I think of OpenPhone, sure, your competitors on paper are RingCentral and like those other VoIP products, but when I thought of OpenPhone, you seem like you're in a category on your own. So how do you think about differentiating from competitors?
Totally. So I think that one of the advantages we've had, and I think it's, I'll take any advantage I can get, is that there is an existing category. And when we started out OpenPhone, we've had the advantage of being in a place where people already know they need a business phone. People are searching for a solution like ours. Maybe not every customer of ours knows about VoIP and all the industry sort of like stuff, acronyms, but some do, and some are looking for a product like OpenPhone. And I think that the first kind of like order of business is, okay, let's just for a second say, this is our industry. This is like the space we play in. How can we capture the existing demand? Because there is existing demand, and I think sometimes it's easier to capture the existing demand than to create net new demand and to build a whole new category. So our just ethos is first doing a really, really good job capturing the existing demand, differentiating our brand, and then as we build those muscles, really creating net new demand, which is absolutely what we're doing and what we're going to do. But I feel like from the earlier days, I think to me, it's easier to capture the existing demand. And we built OpenPhone very consciously knowing all the downsides of existing solutions. So it's easy for us to say, hey, I've talked to people who use our competitors. I know what they don't like. I know what are the problems. We can go and be super direct and say, hey, we solved this problem, and this problem too. And I feel like, I know it's not very like sexy, and it's a lot more fun to be like, we're creating a net new thing completely. But I feel like this allows us to have a good foundation. So when we go and build our category, let's say, right, we have like an existing base of customers and revenue to rely on. We're not starting from scratch.
Yeah, you mentioned capturing existing demand, which I love because I've heard of companies who try to out the gate create their own category and they just spend millions of dollars and don't have anything to show for it, which it takes a lot of money to do that, like the likes of Drift might have done. So maybe on that idea of capturing demand, I read a post that I think you shared it about your first 1,000 customers and how you went through Facebook groups and Reddit and did these really hacky user acquisition tactics. And as you matured, you had to kind of evolve to get more of the paying customers. So tell us about that journey of how you went from like 0 to 100 users and beyond that.
For sure. Yeah, it was a lot of Facebook groups and subreddits. It was really, I think just leaning into the strength of the fact that we, first of all, leaning into the fact that I found basically forums on Facebook as well as on Reddit, where there were people who were very, very much clearly saying, hey, I'm using this product, which is our competitor. I'm not happy about it. Like, here's like some downsides. And I figured that was very easy for me to be like, hey, by the way, we are building an alternative. Let me know if you want to chat about it. A lot of those things I did in the early days were so, I guess, like the definition of things that don't scale, because I think there were definitely things I did that I would now look back and cringe and say they're spammy. But there was also things I've done that were very unscalable. Like I had just conversations with people. I was like, hey, I see your post. You wrote about all the downsides of using, let's say, RingCentral or like Google Voice, other providers. Can we talk about it? I would love to understand what you are struggling with, so we can help you better. And also, I think it helped because at the time we were not even in beta. Like we were so early. There's really nothing I can even sell you. That was such a cool thing that I didn't appreciate at the time, because when I was at that time, I was always like, oh no, oh, I wish we already had a product so I could actually sign people up. But the fact that we did not have a product and we were in that super, super early stage actually made me a lot better at writing those cold emails and stuff, because I literally can't sell you anything. Even if you wanted to give me money, there's nothing to get for me to get, right? So that allowed me to just talk to so many people. So when we already had a product, I could go back to them and be like, hey, remember we talked about this? By the way, we have a beta or alpha, check us out. And I think that was so powerful. I still wish I could do it a lot better if I went back in time. But I didn't appreciate that the fact that we could be incredibly transparent. We could be like non-salesy at all, go to different forums, different groups, and say, hey, we're working on this problem. Let me know if you want to try out the product when it's ready. So simple message, got so many people, and it was a good launch pad for when we had our beta.
That's an interesting point. I was under the impression that you were just spamming these groups with, hey, use OpenPhone, but it sounds like it was more like you were still doing the user research and validating what you were building as you were building it. Is that fair to assume?
Well, they were both. I think I definitely was. So yeah, they were both, to be honest. Well, you were asking about so it's different, 0 to 100 versus 100 beyond. The first, really what happened, I mean, very important point is that for a while, our product was, maybe for the first, 8 months, it was free. So first of all, it was free. And then there was a point that we were just in a true beta stage. So I'll tell you this. When I figured out that just putting our website places doesn't work, I kind of went into this like, hey, let me just talk about the problem and see if there are people here who need help and who I can talk to. That worked so much better. Of course, it was less scalable because I couldn't just like drop links and stuff. But that worked a lot better. So I would categorize my work at the time to be this like painful experience of doing things, to realizing that this is not the way to do it because it's too spammy, iterating my approach and coming back to something which is now how I would have done it. I would not talk about the product at all. I would just be a lot more focused on pain points that people have. But can't go back in time. So here we are.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. When I was doing product management at HubSpot, I remember spamming a lot of forums and like Slack. It was Slack communities that were big at the time, and going into those and just posting a link about this thing we were building and realizing it didn't get anything. And eventually I realized, wait, part of my job is actually engaging with these people, even if it's not scalable. Like, I can't get feedback just by sharing a link. I need to DM people and just say, hey, I saw you posted about this thing. Like, I'm working on this thing. I won't sell you on it, but I'd love to hear about if it would support you and what you're trying to do. And we got like, people were more than happy to jump on conversations. They didn't even accept gift cards we were offering for their time. They just said, yeah, I love talking about this stuff. Just don't sell me.
Absolutely. I think that's, yeah, I found exactly the same thing. And now I'm just looking back in time to our first customers. For example, one of our very, very early customers is now actually a affiliate partner, which I'm so happy about, because we had, I found a lot of these Facebook groups where, there are people who are building a community. And also from my own experience building a community, I think at some point I realized, like, wait a minute, this is what it is, right? Like, people want to build communities and no one wants a person in their community who is going to spam their members. I figured that out. And I realized that it's more about, hey, what value can I offer? And for some of these communities on Facebook of small business owners, I actually ended up saying, hey, you know what? I am, I'm building this product. I've learned probably everything I can about phone numbers and what it's like to use different numbers for your business and why you should do this versus the other approach. And I just offered, say, hey, I'll come to your Facebook group, your Facebook community. I'm happy to do like a live or create some video content that's exclusive to your group. And were so happy to hear it, and they ended up saying, of course, like, help me out here. I'm trying to make content for my group. I'm like, I'll help you. So I ended up partnering like that. And again, at the time, the product was so early. I mean, sure, we got some signups, but now that I look at it, like, we were still in beta. But that seeded the plan for like a bigger partnership, where now some of these folks are like official OpenPhone partners, and they, they also take in some of the upside of having their members use the product.
That's awesome. And you mentioned earlier that you had the product that was free for about 8 months, and maybe the last 5 years or so, or 5 to 10 years, freemium was the whole thing in product-led growth. And I think maybe with the current economic conditions, not doing that must have been a very smart decision for you all, because free users, from my experience, can be quite challenging to support, both in terms of volume and challenges that they have. So I'd love to hear more about that decision early on of not having that purely free plan for OpenPhone. And I think even now people are having trouble deciding, do we do a free trial, or do we just do only paid, or do we do freemium? Tell us about that.
For sure. I think for us, the decision was very easy, because when we start, so first of all, the decision is easy for us because there is a cost associated with every text message you send and every call you make. I think even though, when you think about the product is internet-based phone solution, our product works by connecting you to people who don't necessarily use OpenPhone. And there's a cost associated there coming from carriers. So our product has the decision was very easy, to be honest.
Yeah.
We have to pay for every text message. We have to pay, like, let's say we have free users. There's a hard dollar amount that they will cost. And initially, in the early days, before we got into YC, we didn't even think we would raise funding. For a while, we wanted to raise funding, of course, but we couldn't rely on it in building our business. We couldn't rely on an angel investor coming in and just funding this whole thing.
Funding all the burn.
We just knew that we have to sustain the business. So I think also what happened is, because the product wasn't free, we actually saw, and I mentioned there was like a time, or 8 months or so, when it was free. The moment the product became paid, the quantity of feedback was less, because some people were like, well, I'm just not going to pay. But the quality of feedback went up so much. And it helped us understand who really needs our product versus for whom it's a nice to have. Because if it's nice to have, then sure, you'll use it for free, but you wouldn't pay for it. But having that paywall made it super clear for us what types of businesses really, really need our product and are willing to pay more and more and more money, versus businesses that were just like, that's fine, I'll use a free alternative. So to us, I'm very glad that we made that decision. But again, can't really take credit for it, because it was a very obvious one given the economics.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point, because just a couple of years ago, it was like, hey, let's get all the product signups, let's get all the leads we can. And at least recently, with a lot of the conversations we've had with clients, is we want to make sure we get quality leads. So everyone's getting a lot more stringent with their ICP definitions, who they actually want to use the product, like who they actually support, and which users that they're like, hey, you can use the product, but you're not going to get any support. Like we might do email support for those folks. So it sounds like because of those costs you had, you might have built a model and you were like, oh, this is going to cost a lot of money to support a free user, I imagine.
Yeah, we had some people telling us like, "Hey, you're gonna like blow up when you do freemium," and I was like, "I'm sure we will. I'm sure a lot of people will want a free phone number." But also, our focus has been. I think another thing for us is like consumer versus business.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, for a lot of business use cases, you actually want to pay for something as critical as your phone. And freemium attracts a lot more consumers. Look, one day I do have to mention, I really want the day to come when we can sustainably, in a great way, in a great delightful way, offer a free tier. And it's like I have to say, I hope that day comes because I would love for that to happen. But I think that as an early stage startup, focus is your best friend, and doing that early just gets you into nowhere, because you can really only do one direction, right? You're either building a free plan comes with a lot of challenges, the upsell paths and the nurtures, the sequences. It's like the whole thing, the economics of it. And for us, we knew that we're building a product for businesses, and we have like such a massive roadmap of things that our customers really want from us, where we think our best bet is making our customers super happy and delivering on the values and the features that they look for. So doing both right now at this stage would just not work, and would kind of like the focus is really useful.
Yeah, it sounds like many of the decisions were about kind of that long-term thinking, right? Like, sure, we could have gotten a ton of free users in the short term, but what would that have meant for our burn rate and all of that in the long term? Probably would have made you lose focus trying to support all those users.
Totally. It also helps. I have to say, by the way, generally, I mean, I feel like it's nice to feel like, oh, we're so smart for making this decision. Quite frankly, again, we had I think the advantage of not feeling, raising money was never very easy, and especially in those early days. So I think we just had the benefit of being very frugal and very lean. And at the time, I thought it was like, oh, I wish we just raised a lot more money. But now I think it was actually a good thing, because we were forced to make much better business decisions.
So you mentioned it was tough. You mentioned you didn't even expect to fundraise, and that it was difficult. What was going on that made it difficult? Because I recall in the last couple of years, at least, VCs were just throwing cash at startups. So tell us more about that time.
So yeah, I'm referring to. So here I'm actually specifically referring to our very, very early days, and the YC, the seed round. Look, I think what was very difficult for us, I think that is the fact that we are entering, and we are still in a really busy market, and with a very complex product, with a lot to build, with a lot of maybe like pre-existing notions for what a business phone solution should do, and in the early days, I think that I can tell you now all the ways that we differentiate, and all the ways that we, why businesses should choose to use OpenPhone and not our alternatives. But I think in those very early days, and I can see the point. It was just there wasn't much proof point. Now I can show you so many proof points of how we differentiate and what we've done. But again, I think the challenge for us is we had to meet just a certain bar of product for our product to even be used, right? Because when you think of a business phone solution, there's just certainly it has to work on all your devices. The calls have to work, messages. There's a lot of complexity just to make the bare minimum work, and we had to go through that hump. And that was when fundraising was challenging, because you have to convince folks that, hey, we're going to not only go over this hump, but once we're on the other side, we have all these different things we're doing that make us very different from the market. It was a lot about selling the dream. You're selling the dream without having any proof points, and that's what made it challenging. And again, for us, we knew we're building this business for the long run, and we knew that we're going to be in it, right? So charging money and having customers support us meant giving us a chance to make it work. So there was no question about free. Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, this idea of selling a dream, and now a couple of years later, you're a team of 100 living the dream, and there's so much more to build, right?
Yes, well, it's living the dream. I think that it's all sounds fun, but of course it's you get to a certain point and then you realize, oh well, there's all these other problems. So
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. I'm loving every day, but it's definitely ups and downs for sure.
Yeah. Tell us about some of those ups and downs. I mean, you went from individual contributor product manager to starting a company, being scrappy, doing all these things to turn nothing into something. Now you're at almost 100 employees. What were those challenges like that you faced? I imagine like even you yourself had to change and evolve as the business grew.
For sure. I think that there were so many. Looking back in the early days, I definitely felt like, and again, this is the journey of the founder. You're going into the unknown, and for me personally, in the earliest days of OpenPhone, I was doing like sales and marketing and customer support. And I think specifically, and maybe the reason why I talk a lot about marketing and you hear me talk about marketing is because I actually learned very quickly, like I have to figure out how to do marketing because it's me and my co-founder. He's building the product. He's doing all of that. That's how, we divided the roles. And I was like, well, I have to figure out how marketing works because if not, it's not going to go far. And, the challenge, I think, is the moment you start getting at least somewhat okay at something, your job changes. So I felt like the moment I was like, well, I think I can like figure these things out in terms of how we support customers or how we sell or how we market. The moment I got to like a decent point to a degree, I'm like, well, now actually my job is not to do that anymore. My job is to find someone who's going to do that, hire them, find the right person, and make sure that I do it for many different functions and make sure there's cohesive work. We're doing work cohesively, right? We know where we're going. We have our goals, OKRs, etc. So I think very rapidly you get good at one thing and you feel just for a moment, like you feel like good about yourself. And then you're like, oh, never mind. Have to change my job and have to now start from zero in somewhere very different where you doing something you've never done before. That's been quite a challenge because I felt like, in my career prior to OpenPhone, I felt like I had a chance to like master my craft and I had a chance to like really go into a area like product management. And I felt like I had that opportunity, but I quickly realized that's, I left that to always feel, like the way I feel now, which is like my job is always changing and I'm always starting from like a lower point, let's say.
Yeah, it's definitely a mental and emotional roller coaster. I was talking to my girlfriend about this because she's at a biotech startup and we're very similar. And we were talking over dinner and she said, yeah, I hate how I built this thing from scratch. It's my baby. And then they asked me to move on to another project. And I'm like, we're kind of cursed, like, because that's what we're really good at. And so that's just what we keep going over and over, like doing over and over again. And we don't always get to own the thing from like 0 to 100. We take it from like 0 to 1 or 0 to 10. And then someone else will nurture it and take it to the next level. So I think there are pros and cons to that. You don't get the same fulfillment of growing and scaling one function by yourself.
Absolutely. But I think that the things that, at least the one thing that keeps me engaged and motivated, the one thing that is interesting is that I'm kind of talking to you. You asked me about like the kind of the journey, the ups and downs, the way things have changed. I think now I'm kind of used to this. So it was very painful at first to feel like to go through this transition. I'm now used to it, and now I derive a lot of joy from bringing on incredible people to the business who are just absolutely incredible and handing them over things and being like, have fun. And there's so much joy I derive from seeing them succeed and grow and get more responsibility and that joy, I've seen it happen, and that makes me really happy. So now I'm like, well, this is my kind of purpose here is a big part of my day now is thinking about team building, bringing on amazing people, making sure they all work together well, making sure we're all kind of rowing in one direction.
Yeah. Tell me about maybe some of the growing pains you yourself had. Like maybe that wasn't a natural part of how you function, of like handing things off and like just trusting others with things. Like I personally had trouble with that because I was like, I'm really good at doing this. Like I can do it really well. Now I have to hand it off to someone and just trust them. Like maybe that's just one example of like delegating and learning to do that as a leader. But how have you had to change as the business grew and required like different traits from you?
Absolutely. I think that delegation is a huge one. Another one is one of the things that I found is that so there's delegation, and there's also, I think, being ready to delegate. I found that in cases where I perhaps didn't feel like that worked really well, in those cases, I think I kind of just wasn't ready for it, and I had to. I felt it was like unfinished business, and I'm one of those people. For example, I like to hand over something that's like in a decent shape, but I had to go through that. I had to like teach myself that it's just not going to be possible. And there have definitely been cases where, and it actually now I'm partially kind of relieved, because sometimes like, hey, this is maybe now becoming your problem. So, hey, thank you. In terms of delegation, what I had to learn is that when I when I know I need to delegate something that might be already too late, I should have delegated it a while before, because just going back to maybe something that, and like I see you yourself, you also kind of resonate with, is I think I'm a builder. I like creating things. I love that like early journey, and it's a little uncomfortable to feel like I love the idea of like, let me take this from here to here and put it in good shape and hand it over to someone. But when I feel like I need to hand over something that I myself know is like nowhere near good shape, and I haven't even had a chance to like really like kind of package it off in some way, that makes it harder for me. But I've just seen cases where me not delegating and not handing things off earlier ends up long term being a disadvantage, and also like hurting the business. So I think it's more about, I've seen that happen. So now I realize like, hey, if I know I need to delegate something, that means I had to do it like a month ago.
Yeah.
There's no answer. I'm still finding the answer to this, but it's just a little bit about experience and doing a couple of these like sort of handoffs, and then finding out like, okay, I should do it earlier.
Yeah, I can totally resonate. And I've even caught myself doing this thing where I will hand it off, but I'll still ask like, how can I support? How can I help? And sometimes I'll jump in and support, or what I think is supporting. And then I'll actually just ask, hey, is this helpful, or is this just causing more challenges for you because you have to deal with me now? And they said, actually, it'd be great if you step out. And I'm glad they feel empowered to tell me that. And I'm relieved because I can just completely trust them to own it now, and they're fully accountable for it. But I've definitely had to check myself to make sure I'm not accidentally getting in the way instead of helping.
Totally. There is one aspect of it, and I mean, so there is maybe like a counter example. I find something that I've observed about myself is that if I kind of let go, so of course my job is to like let go of things already, figure that out. That's what I'm doing. But I think sometimes what I've seen and myself and other founders is that when your day is usually just dealing with all kinds of like things, emergencies, like just everything falls on your shoulders like that. And like, how do you stay motivated? How do you, you need to get up every morning being excited about what you're doing. And one thing I found is there are certain things that I like to carve out that I can kind of do almost a little bit as an individual contributor. And this is still a bit of a work in progress, but I feel like that's like my small piece of work where I get a chance to kind of exercise some of those muscles that like basically I get a chance to like stay up to date on things. And I wonder, I mean, for now I can still do it. Maybe one day I can't even do that. But that's a way that I can just have something that I can really look forward to. And I think if it brings me joy and if it obviously brings value to the business, there's something to be said about carving out that, like, I don't know how many hours you can in a week to do something that you really enjoy doing, that just keeps you sort of sane every week.
Yeah. Well, what are some examples, if you can share, of projects you're carving out for yourself to as that
Absolutely.
outlet?
I'll tell you all about it. For example, the one of the like small projects I'm doing right now is working on our referral program. I'm wearing a tight, so it's a feature. I am a PM for this new evolution of the program, and I think maybe because I come from product management and that's what I did in the past, and I'm super bullish on referral as for a product like ours. It's a small project, right? It's quite defined, but I am really enjoying working on it, and I think the fact that I have something like that to do, which is like, again, technically not a part of not really what I'm supposed to be doing, I guess, but a chance to help the team, chance to kind of like own something small. It makes me very happy.
I love that. I'm kind of flexing some of my PM skills right now too, with ChatGPT, as you probably heard of. And I don't code Python, but I can spec out something really well and then like figure out how to build it. And I just went to ChatGPT and I said, here's what I'm trying to do. I want to put one input. I want 3 outputs with these prompts and all these things. I coded like an MVP last night just in my free time. And I felt amazing because I haven't gotten to do that in a long time. So I can resonate with carving out those small like product projects for yourself.
Yeah, no, it's so great. Another one for me, which I'm almost going to say it as a part of motivating myself to do it. You kind of mentioned that I've written some posts about just the journey of building OpenPhone and sharing some lessons learned. I have like a love and hate relationship with that, because anytime I'm writing something, I feel like it's so horrible, and I kind of like feel, I never feel it's good enough. But then when I publish something and I get like, hey, like this was like very useful, and I get positive feedback, that energizes me so much. It's like the best thing someone can tell me.
Yeah.
And
that dopamine hit.
Oh, it just hits you. Yeah. So just saying it as a that's another example of, and I enjoy writing, that I like to carve out some time for that. And again, it just helps me almost stay kind of like in shape, and kind of ship something. I feel like what it is a little bit is that I love shipping things, and that's just like ability to do something small and keep shipping.
Yeah. So based on everything we're talking about today, you're clearly really driven and motivated. As a founder, you probably think about your company all the time. I'm wondering, how do you maintain this harmony with like work and carving out like things for yourself, like just normal life things, and not getting super stressed out, and like kind of keeping yourself motivated and not stressed out all the time about business? Like, how do you maintain your mental health?
That's a great question. I think I wish I had a very kind of sophisticated framework, but it's actually quite simple. First, I would always, and this is the way I kind of was prior to OpenPhone as well, I would rather work like a lot more during the week than during the weekend. For me, weekend is almost like sacred time. I have no problem like evenings, like working late into the evening doesn't really bother me. And I think I'm kind of just like maybe used to it now. But what I know for sure is I need my weekend to completely recharge. I need to go out, do something. I actually should probably not be at home because I would be tempted to like open my computer. I need to like get out into the nature. We have a dog, so that helps, like going hiking, just leaving, spending time with friends, ideally not talking about work. Like weekend is that for me. And because of that, that gives me energy to, because like I would, for example, come from a weekend on like Sunday evening, I would like, catch up on work a little bit. But I would feel like on Monday, I'm refreshed. I think my goal is starting a week with that like full tank of energy. And the only way I do it is by having a weekend completely like disconnected. That's one thing I do. Another thing for me is, I think kind of goes back to the previous point. Work is stressful, but it can't all be stressful, and goes back to the fact that I mentioned I like to carve out little things for me to do that I just really enjoy. That those things help me stay motivated, because there's plenty of things I do that I don't maybe like as much. So that's one way I cope with it. Another one is, and this is where I'm like starting to kind of get into it more. It's just I find myself, I'm a social person, and I've kind of had to learn that I get a lot of energy from hanging out with people, and I've like this is who I am. And I think if I'm by myself, I'm gonna end up like getting into work somehow. I'll just gravitate towards work, but I need to distract myself by doing group activities. So for example, I found that like I can't go to the gym by myself, because if I go, I'll be thinking about work and I'll just like be checking my phone. I have to go to like a group class where there are people around me, and I can't just be like on my phone. So I think it's learning yourself and your habits, knowing your bad habits, and I know what they are for me, and then doing things where putting yourself in situations that make it very hard for you to fall into those bad habits. So one other example is I love going places where there's no like internet coverage, because I know I can't trust myself, because my phone is like, I should ideally I'm spending time in places where I have that chance to like, I can't even be tempted to like check my phone. Yeah. Another one, which I know is just like a side note, I hate the idea of like using internet when you're flying somewhere. I think Delta announced, they were like, we're going to have like free Wi-Fi. I'm like, please, no. I actually, like, I don't want to work when I'm flying.
What do you do on planes then when you're on a flight?
Movies, read, sleep, basically like anything other than like working. To me, like opening your laptop on the flight, no, not for me.
Yeah. I used to do that. I just used to read or watch movies on flights, but I found I was on a flight recently from California to Boston, and I was on my laptop the entire time. And at the end of the trip, I was like, I'm wired right now. I'm stressed because I'm thinking about work, and it's midnight. I should probably not do that as much, or at least cap my time in an hour or something.
I think there's one good one is maybe just writing. I think to me, like I guess I don't like the idea of easily accessible Wi-Fi on planes, because I could be on my laptop, but maybe I'm writing something. And to me, that's like therapeutic. I am journaling, or again, it's my time. I think it's carving out that time to be to not feel connected. The downside I see of kind of like my role and what I do is I have to be very thoughtful about like muting notifications, turning things off, because otherwise, like I'm so wired just from all the notifications that I get. I think that's the challenging part. So on the plane, I'm like, nope, I don't want to connect to Wi-Fi, and I hope they make it very expensive so I don't do it.
Yeah. I think there's also another added layer for you. I think I heard on another interview you did that your co-founder is your spouse. So what is that like, building a company with your spouse, and like how do you have like an agreement where like there's set hours where you don't talk about work? How do you kind of maintain that harmony?
For sure, that's an added challenge. You add that on top of it. I think what's interesting is that, well, first of all, well, the one thing is we kind of like different spaces, like we work away from each other, which helps for sure. We also the way that we started the company is like the split of responsibilities. I've been focused on sales, marketing, support from the earliest days, and he was like building the product. And in some way, that kind of division has stayed throughout, and it helps because in some ways, like, yeah, the problems we're dealing with, the things we're working on are usually different. So I think in some way, like, we're obviously working on the same company, but our worlds have become more different in terms of like the things we do. But back to your question, staying sane. Frankly, I think it's the yeah, great question. It goes back to just finding what works for us. For example, the ways that like I realize like I'm quite a social person. For me, like some social interactions can be like energizing, and like I need to carve out time for that. For him, it may be other things that he gets energy from. So I just feel like it's finding what works for us individually, and also what works for us together. But I feel like there's no like ideal formula. I wish I gave you like, hey, here's the one thing you can do, and suddenly it's all easy. I think it's just like finding what works for you yourself, and like being self-aware around like the bad habits you have, and hopefully you have mechanisms to prevent you from falling into them.
Yeah, it was honestly a selfish question for me because both myself and my girlfriend work a lot. And if we're left to our own devices, we would just work and talk about work. So we have an agreement that over dinner, if we want to talk about work, we have to ask for permission. Like, is it okay if I talk about work? Because sometimes one of us is like, I'm so stressed or tired right now, I can't try to process what you're about to tell me. And we'll say, like, can we talk about it after dinner or like tomorrow? So we kind of feel what each other's energy is before jumping straight into like, oh, I had this client meeting or I had this like project that I'm working on. So that's been one thing that's been helpful, just explicitly being like, I'm going to talk about work. Is that okay? Before jumping into it.
That's a good one. I wish we were so strict about it. It's actually been so interesting because in the early days of OpenPhone, I was the one who was always talking about work, and my partner was like, "Hey, like you really should stop." And now I find myself doing that and be like, "Hey, I have had enough of this." So it was interesting how that changed. I think it's kind of for us more like an unwritten rule. We can kind of see how each other feels, and but I like your idea. I think it just also shows up in the fact that, for example, for us, like the weekend is during the weekend, it's like, hey, do you feel like talking about work? I don't know. That's when that question comes up. If I'm very honest, during the week, work is a lot more. There's a lot of work conversations during the week, but the weekend is like, yeah, you know what? Let's not talk about that.
Yeah, let's just go on this hike and not talk
exactly.
about
it. Yep.
So I know we're coming up on time. We'll close out with some of these closing questions.
Let's do it.
What's one opinion you have about business you think people would disagree with?
I think that industry, like deep industry experience in something is overrated.
Oh, say more about that. What do you mean?
So I think that, well, for example, I feel like if I had a lot of experience, let's say in the VoIP field, I don't know if I would necessarily start OpenPhone. I feel like there is a balance, but I believe that if you go into an industry kind of brand new, let's say you're building a product in a new industry, or you're a marketer entering a new space, I think you have an opportunity to have that like fresh point of view, which that space needs. So I think that, for example, I interview a lot of people who have never worked in our space, and I think it's great. And they're like, "Oh, I don't have any experience in this industry." I'm like, "Wonderful, great.
That's what we want."
That's a good thing. Yeah. So I'm. That's just I think that deep expertise in the industry for some, of course, depends on the role, but I see so much value from having that fresh perspective.
I love that. What's one impactful piece of advice you've been given?
Something that I've been given and something I've learned during our time during YC is that try to do the easy thing first. And as an example, I found that when we were just starting the company, we were like, oh, we want to like go out and acquire these customers. We want to do these things. And the advice that Michael Seibel gave us, which I still I talk about it all the time, is what is the easiest thing to do? So for example, why don't you acquire customers that are very easy to acquire, which makes perfect sense. I think sometimes people have these like aspirations for like, oh, I want to do this like big thing. But I find the best way to do it is build your confidence up to that. So if there are like customers you can acquire very easily, or things you can build easily, and things that are like very like accessible to you, do those first to learn. And then that builds your confidence to like do harder things. So I always encourage people to kind of like to do the easier thing first, to learn and get that feedback loop going.
Yeah, I haven't met Michael before, but based on what I've read from him and interviews, I'm like, this dude is so wise. Like, he just helps you focus on the right things instead of getting overwhelmed by all the other things. It's impressive.
100%. I think what I've learned from him is the answer is usually very simple, and we all overcomplicate things. And going back to the benefit of focus, pick one thing, even if it's easy, do it really well, learn from it, go on to the next thing, versus find sometimes we're pressured to do like 10 things at the same time and nothing works and you don't even know what went wrong there.
Yeah. All right. What is one book you'd recommend more people read?
This is where you can tell I'm so deep in the startup mode. I recommend, and I think I might have gifted this, definitely have gifted this book to folks, the High Growth Handbook by Elad Gil.
Yeah.
It's one of those books that I reference. I think it's one thing to read a book and kind of put it aside and say that it was a great book. But it's another thing to feel like you're going through your journey and you keep opening the book and rereading the chapters. It's just incredible and has so many lessons and stories on scaling companies. I am in that mind space a lot right now, so I feel that's the book that I would recommend to absolutely every founder.
Yeah. What do you find yourself going back and referencing in that book right now? Maybe right now, we'll narrow it in.
Sure. A lot of chapters on hiring. I think that's probably the one where, obviously everyone knows the importance of hiring and the importance of just, the difference it makes, and how hard it is because, it's probably one of those things that they don't really, well, first of all, definitely no one teaches it in school. And unless you've hired a lot of people in your previous career, unless you've done that many times, you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. And those are the chapters. So it's a lot around hiring, just being a manager. I think that's the one that leading people and the lessons learned. I think what I personally like is hearing about other people's experiences. So I love, and there's actually a book that I am going to, I just got, by the way. I'm sure I will be recommending it to people too, but it's from the former COO at Stripe. I'm blanking on her name, but she just
Claire Hughes Johnson,
people.
Scaling People.
Claire,
I just got people. It on my shelf. Yeah.
I got it last night. I was like, can't wait to dig in. I have a feeling that I think this is going to be a book that I will be recommending to people too.
Yeah, I would love to trade notes because hiring and managing and leading has been the main thing on my mind as well. And I'm quite proud of our hiring process because we've been able to weed a lot of people out who are great interviewers, but not great at the function, and vice versa too, where they're great at their function, but we realize they're just not good at interviewing, which I know is like the hardest thing to suss out during the process. So happy to trade notes about all of that. It's been a learning experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also I think the other part is that people, I think, don't talk about. It's obviously a two-way street. And I think that one thing that founders are told, and that recruiting is and hiring is so much about selling. Like it seems like, oh, I'm going to like really, really try. I'll do everything I can to sell you on an opportunity. And while of course we can be tempted to do that, I think that it's about finding the right people who actually want what you can offer, being honest about what you can offer, what you cannot offer, and finding people who really want that. So that has really changed in my mind. I think I was a lot more kind of like aggressive about it in the earlier days and felt like everyone should want to join us. But I think it's about finding the right people for you, and that right fit is what really I think is important.
Yeah. You mentioned you're hiring. What roles are you trying to fill right now?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There are several. So I'll tell you about the roles I am directly, there are many roles we're hiring for, but I'm directly working on finding our VP of marketing, as well as we're looking for a senior/lead growth marketer with demand gen as their focus. So if someone is by any chance listening, we're looking for a VP of marketing. We're also looking for a demand gen focused growth marketer.
How big is your marketing team right now? Is that the first marketing leader that's going to be in place, or do you have a CMO yet?
So no, this is the first. This would be our head of marketing, VP of marketing.
Big hire.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very, very exciting. Our marketing team, I think 7 people, 7 people, I believe. Yeah. I have to I sometimes have to count. Yeah.
You lose track now. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. It sounds like it's the next chapter where you're going to start scaling out your go-to-market.
Absolutely. That is a chapter we're entering. Yeah. And it's, the order of operation. I feel we've made a ton of progress with our product. There's a lot more to build, of course. I feel like we're like 10% to where we need to be, but we have product market fit, and this is the stage of scaling go-to-market. Absolutely.
I love it. Well, I feel like we can have a whole separate conversation about hiring and management and leadership. So maybe we'll save that for a part 2 down the line once you've gone through some more of this hiring. But
absolutely, I would love that.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's a great place to stop. Daryna, it was a pleasure to have you on a show. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.